So, tonight's lore stream. Like I said, I want to work on the Northern Kingdoms, and the Northern Kingdoms are the area where the first arc of the campaign took place. It's where Dotun's Rock is located, so it's where the second arc ended, and it's your standard sort of pseudo-European area. It's where your knights and your castles and stuff are. Anakra as a world has several continents and biomes and climates, and I tried to add a bunch of different cultures, so it's not all just Middle Earth. But the Northern Kingdoms is maybe the most recognizable traditional fantasy sort of area. And you can see on the map, which should also be available, and I might also add a command for that. The map needs some work. There's a more complete version of it available, but it has a bunch of spoilers on it, so I didn't want to post it yet. But let's just pull this up real quick. The text is kind of hard to read at this angle. So this is a map, just at this size, of the Eastern continent. The two eastern continents of Giru in the north and Isatum in the south. And this area right here, sort of, this is the Northern Kingdoms. I'm not totally happy with my equator and my tropics. I feel like Galadron and such, they're not far enough north to have the climate that I want, so I'm not totally convinced on the geography and the climate. But I do know that if you measure from north to south here, you get roughly, I don't know what the correct term is. It's the distance from the North Pole to the South Pole on Earth. So it's roughly Earth-like. So from the North Pole to the South Pole is 8,595 miles. And how many hexes do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's about 45. So let's do this figure divided by 45. 191. So each of these hexes at this scale is roughly 200 miles. And the way that the Worldographer works is I can expand this, and then I can decide how many sub-hexes across every hex is, so I can zoom in and do like a more detailed map. And at some point, I'm going to do that. I'm going to make it available so that you can actually see a decent map of the Northern Kingdoms. So imagine every hex is about 200 miles. So the Northern Kingdoms, it's roughly the size of like a portion of Europe. And this down here, this is Amon Karak, and this is where Arc 2 took place. Somewhere over here, I want to say. Because it had to be close enough to the Foamhor Woods, which are what exploded. So this region right here, yeah, my cursor is captured. This area right here doubled in size. So the forest expanded, and it went all the way up here, and it consumed Dotun's Rock, which I think is around here, and it went all the way down to Amon Karak and consumed Masru. So what I would want to do is I want to work on this region right here. Amon Karak does still exist. It's just the name for like a region, basically. It's not a unified kingdom because, one, it's massive, and two, if you look at history, what I have in my head for the era that Castles and Castles is set is sort of just after the fall of Rome. So we're talking the year like, and maybe even a little earlier than that, like the year 500-ish. Very early medieval period, and it's not quite there because it's compounded by some of the recent history, semi-recent history that underlies the Kingdom of Galadron, which was apocalyptic and traumatic. Yay! So you don't have cities, you don't have big like nations. You have local kings and kingdoms and city-states and small forms of government. Nationalism in the idea of we have a national identity, not the nasty people running around being mean to each other mode, didn't really come to be for a while. Like, you had people proud of being Roman, but you didn't have this idea of nation states. You had, oh, this is the area of these people, and they have this much power, and they control this much territory. Yeah, so it would actually be like no plate mail. I don't know if stirrups are around. I think stirrups are around in like some areas, but not others. No plate mail, no crossbows. There's actually a lot of technology that if I was writing a novel about this period, it'd be, you know, you'd have hauberks and very what you'd call Dark Ages. But I'm not running the game that way because when it comes down to it, when people play D&D, they want to have access to everything in the book. It takes a very specific kind of party to be like, oh, so we're using bronze weapons, and we can only use these types of armor because this hasn't been invented yet. Like, that's all fun and good from a lore perspective, but especially with newer players, you just want to say, here's the player's handbook, you can have everything in it. We're not going to worry about the nature of the pre-industrial society we live in. There's no reason why gunpowder can't exist, but nobody's found it at this point. I haven't really got to a point. I think the very latest campaign I've run, like chronologically in the timeline, would be right before sort of an early Renaissance period. But that's a while from now. That's several apocalypses from now. No spoilers. So, we're working on Galadron and the Northern Kingdoms by extension, because Galadron, well, you know what, actually, let's pull up the timeline, because that's the other thing we have access to. Timelines, castles and casters. There's another secret timeline that goes like 5,000 more years into the future, but given all the stuff that's happened so far, we'll see if any of that history takes place. Yeah, that's the thing, is that like people discovered stirrups in different places. Like technology did not advance uniformly, right? So there would have been fireworks and such in China. So I think that at this point in this era, during castles and casters, nobody's figured out gunpowder. They have magic, they have alchemist fire, etc. Maybe in the next age, somebody should discover rudimentary gunpowder and start figuring it out. And because magic advanced, and that's another thing, is that with Anakra, I'm going for this odd sort of mix between... This D&D world is not following the actual progression of history. Because if you try to take a world and then apply magic to it, it should be unrecognizable. Like, you can't just say it's exactly like medieval Europe or exactly like, you know, Imperial China, but there's magic. Because the sheer impact that magic would have is unbelievable. Even super low-level magic introduces quality of life changes that completely transform a society. Like, you can have very low-level create water spells, for example. That changes everything. Cheers, Bradley. So I am not striving for a super realistic historical progression. I'd say I'm taking inspiration from history to a certain degree, but it's more important for me to have a nice mythic, fairy tale, legendary feel to the timeline and the story than it is to follow strict scientific advancement. But I do like to take bits and pieces from that to make it feel more real, or to inspire me when it comes to developing different cultures and societies and such. So it's very wibbly wobbly, it's very in the middle, but I'm not going to go through the entire timeline. This is not a history stream. I'm happy to talk, obviously, like any dungeon master, I'm happy to ramble on about all the lore, but lore is there to be the backbone and the fiber of an interesting story with interesting characters. It's not there for me to pull out my book and then sit here and read and make everybody live through the story I want to tell. The story is what happens at the table. But let's talk about some, in brief, let's talk about some of the most important elements of history in the Northern Kingdoms. Alright. So in 6412, which is from like the very creation of Anakra. So the don't worry about like what year it happened, but basically, so 6412, and our campaign takes place in 7344. So it's been about 900 years since, it's been about 900 years from this event to the quest for the Book of Dawn. So 900 years ago, there are 4 elemental sovereigns. They're basically the most powerful deities, known deities in Anakra. And they're in charge of physical reality. They're in charge of creation. So you have the 4 elemental sovereigns. Erekura, the sovereign of earth, Vindur, the sovereign of the skies, Liban, the sovereign of the seas, and Sin Al-Gawar, the sovereign of fire. They're the ones who separated the Dawn world into the 4 kingdoms. They're very important, blah, blah, blah. We've sort of run into Vindur a little bit in that Tiberius pissed him off. So, about 900 years ago, Uzul the Destroyer, through a series of very tricky events, actually killed one of the sovereigns. He killed Arakura, the sovereign of Earth. And nobody knew this could be done. This is completely unexpected. When Arakura died, she didn't stop existing, because the sovereigns, in a very real way, are the elements. You can't kill Earth, because if you actually kill Earth, then all mineral substances would break apart and stop existing. So the sovereigns are unkillable, but they had manifestations. They were able to project avatars. They were able to sort of be people. And when Arakura was killed, her people, her personhood dissipated. So her spirit still exists and is sort of out there infusing the world, but her direct will was banished. This was a cataclysmic event, and it changed the course of history, and it's very important for the Northern Kingdoms. It's important for the whole world, right? It's important for everything. There's another continent to the east. There's 2 more continents, and then you can sort of see down here there's a little bit of a continent, but we'll talk about that later. So the history of the Northern Kingdoms and what we're going to be setting up here. 900 years ago, Arakura dies. Uzul uses a sword forged from blood, from iron taken from the lifeblood of the world, and kills Arakura. And this, aside from being a cataclysmic event, sets it up for the second invasion of the Infernals. The first invasion of the Infernals, near the dawn of time, is why there are 4 kingdoms instead of just this one magical world. The second invasion of the Infernals, after they killed Arakura, the sovereigns were weakened. One of their own was dead, and the sovereigns were terrified because they realized they could die. It traumatized them, and when you traumatize a god, like an elemental god of creation, that's going to have some consequences. So the Infernals, led by Uzul, launch an invasion of the mortal world, and they just run amok. And this period of history, it's called the Demonic Imperium, and it lasts for nearly 500 years. So for about 500 years, you've got demons and devils running rampant across the world, and they're incredibly strong. They don't conquer everything, but it's definitely a very dark age. And what happens is, you've got a few holdouts, a few magical special places that are able to resist them through incredibly high-level magic, or powerful defenders, or spiritual presence, some sort. But you've got these islands in the world, and everything else is dangerous wasteland. Or, the reason it's called the Demonic Imperium is because you start having the various people of the world serve the Infernals in order to survive. Evil! So Galadron, and before it was Galadron, just the Northern Kingdoms in general, during this time, most of it is ruled by these demonic imperiums, these various societies that are led by warlocks. They do human sacrifice, or not just human, but they make sacrifices to the Infernals, they participate in blood rituals. Their whole society is shaped either by direct servitude to the fiends, or by powerful people who make deals with the fiends in order to run these immortal societies. And so you end up with, it's like a really messed up Rome, is the way that I'm sort of pitching it. Instead of having the Roman Empire, we have the Demonic Imperium. And I haven't fully detailed out all these different nation states and empires and such. But during this Demonic Imperium, they build huge temples and ziggurats and pyramids, and these huge societies empowered by demonic magic and pacts. They are able to summon creatures to help them construct things. They get forbidden knowledge, so on and so forth. So you end up with these very advanced but very cruel societies. And that lasts, again, for about 500 years, which is long enough for memory to fade, especially if your cultures are being actively destroyed, if people are being actively oppressed. The only history being recorded is mostly by the people serving the fiends, or the people too afraid to resist the people serving the fiends, with the exception of a few pockets of resistance. So for about 500 years, most of the world is controlled by these cruel but advanced, sophisticated empires. So during Casters and Castles, throughout all the lands of Iman Karak and Galadron and Vercingetorix, everywhere they go, instead of having like the old Roman roads, you've got these shrines dedicated to Uzul the Destroyer, and these blood-stained ziggurats and Pantheon-style temples, and these big sophisticated structures with this legacy of blood. And they're scattered all over the place. These are the ancient ruins. Most of the ancient ruins in the area are from the Demonic Imperium. So during this time, one of the pockets of resistance is Brontha, which ends up fighting back against the Demonic Imperium because of their devotion to the Sun God, who is a Titan. You've got the 4 elemental sovereigns sort of at the top of the divine pecking order, and then their immediate offspring in creation are Titans, which is the next divine rank, if you will. And one of them, Zalar, the Sun Rider, is the god of Brontha. He's the god of the sun, and the land of Brontha, which is south of Iman Karak, worships him. And they form this very vigilant, militaristic society, sort of in opposition to the Demonic Imperiums. They wage wars and they go on crusades and such, and they end up going a little bit extremist, but they're fighting to liberate people and to conquer people, but all in the name of good, right? We encountered them a little bit at the beginning of Casters and Castles Season 2 in the very first episode. There was a Paladin of Zalar there, but it hasn't had a huge impact on what you've seen on stream so far. I've talked about Ramius, the Lord of the Underworld, a few times. And this is all leading up sort of to the period that Casters and Castles takes place in. Ramius was a Titan. He was the son of Arakura. And so he was an Earth Titan, and his job was to go to the Wells of Blood, which is the source of new life. And anytime a living creature was born, he basically take this marble dipper and dip it into the Wells of Life, of blood, and pour it into the new life. So that's where it came from. And so he was like this cupbearer to the gods sort of figure. And he was Arakura's son. So Arakura is killed, and he's still out here. And he spends the entire 500 years-ish of the Demonic Imperium studying the workings of creation and the laws of the universe. And when he's ready, when he's done all of his research and all this, he basically rewrites the world in order to end the Demonic Imperium. He inscribes his name on the Emerald Tablets, which are sort of the source code for reality, becomes the god of death, the god of the underworld. We have talked about him a few times on the show. Tiberius swore an oath by the 5 rivers of the underworld. He knew Arya, who was a priestess of Ramius, who was an old family friend. So this figure of Ramius has come up a couple of times during the story. And when he made himself the stern lord, the god of death, he also reprogrammed the world so that all fiends and infernals and demons and such were forcibly dragged and imprisoned in the underworld. So they went from being able to rampage across all the planes of existence and conquer everything to basically being squeezed through the ground into the underworld, physically and metaphysically below the world. So in an instant, he does this, and all the fiends just die. They don't die, but their physical forms are destroyed, and now they're trapped. They're imprisoned, and the power of their worshippers and servants on the mortal world is crippled. So suddenly, the whole ruling class of the Demonic Imperium is wiped out. This leads into a period of invasions as groups of people who were hiding from the Demonic Imperiums in the wilderness suddenly realize everything's going to chaos, so they invade. You've got rebellions and slave uprisings and civil war as the people who just lost all their powers sort of turn on each other. So as soon as Ramius ascends or descends and becomes god of the underworld and banishes the fiends, the demonic empires collapse, and it's a total destructive, chaotic downfall. Is it a good thing? Yeah. Is it clean and pretty? No. And that occurred about, I think, like 400 years before the quest for the Book of Dawn and One Last Ride. And this changes everything. So if you think about it, it's been 400 years when the campaign happened since the fall of the most advanced civilization, which was really nasty and cruel and oppressive and everywhere. and then overnight it just goes up in smoke. So we have a setting where technology and science is still catching up from that. Because yeah, you had mathematicians and historians and scholars and magicians and people accumulating knowledge, but they mostly kept it sort of for the ruling classes, for the people in power. Some of that knowledge was disseminated. Some of that knowledge was freed, like when the looting and the sacking occurred, some of that knowledge was taken out and transported elsewhere. But a lot of it was just lost and burned. Now, this isn't universal because you still had, for example, Connacht, which lies north of Amon Karak and east of the Northern Kingdoms. This is the Valley of the Wood Elves, the Huldra. And they resisted the demonic Imperium because they had some incredibly powerful druidic magic. And I don't know, was Cryus around yet? Let's see. Yeah, so the great magical empire of Ioth fell basically right before Ramius ascended. That used to be down here. And then some of their acolytes fled. So this was during the demonic Imperium. Near the end of the demonic Imperium, there was this powerful magical empire run by elves. They were trying to teach humans. One thing led to another. It fell apart. The survivors took all the lore that they could, including the legendary Book of Dawn, fled to this valley here, and made Cryos, which was the object of the quest from the first arc. So that was a holdout. They had this protected valley, powerful magic, lots and lots of learning and culture and information that they keep completely to themselves. So what you've really got is this world where there's large swaths of it that recently were owned by a horrible, blood-sacrificing, oppressive states, which have just fallen apart, leaving a power vacuum. And then you've got these little holdout areas, a lot of which are not really willing to share their information. So 400 years ago, the Northern Kingdoms go from demonic oppression to figure it out on your own. You also have up here Orelgnat, which was a hobgoblin culture, a very powerful militaristic hobgoblin culture that resisted the demonic Imperium by, again, being very disciplined, very warlike. So as soon as the demonic Imperium ends, the hobgoblins, who have been fighting an internal war, some of them were loyal to the fiends, some of them were against the fiends. The fiend loyalists just get their asses handed to them, and so one of the more powerful, sophisticated cultures left in the wake of this are the hobgoblins up here. Alright, so that's 400 years before the quest for the Book of Dawn. Demonic Imperiums fall, and you've got all these tribes. Like there were tribes, just groups of people hiding in the forest from the demonic Imperiums. And suddenly you've got all these people liberated or just freed. And so it's a huge cultural event, kind of a catastrophe. All the old power structures fall apart, and you've got all these little different cultural groups scattered across the Northern Kingdoms, and they're all thrown into this mix, and they have to figure things out on their own. So there's no big kingdoms anymore. There's little settlements, little protected settlements. This person, the chief of this settlement, the person in charge of this settlement, decides that they're going to team up with this person and maybe have a few settlements in league with each other. Maybe they're going to try to conquer each other. It's very, very small cultural units. And they are able to share and spread information, but there's no big kingdoms at this point. Alright, so that leads us to 50 years after the apotheosis of Ramius. So it's been 50 years since the demonic Imperium fell, and the land is still just hectic. And that, in this atmosphere of chaos, what happens is, this is where King Doten of Doten's Rock kicks in. So all the humans and the dwarves and the gnomes, they're picking up the pieces that were left over from the demonic Imperium, and the giants show up and they say, "Hi, we've been chilling in the Sky Kingdom this whole time, watching all this happen. Now that the fiends are gone, we're going to establish order. We're going to land from the Sky Kingdom. We're going to take over. You're going to serve us." And it was sort of they weren't looking to just like kill everybody and take their stuff. They weren't looking to enslave everybody, but they were very much looking to be like, we're smarter and better than you, so we're going to run things, and you're going to listen to us, and you're going to like it. So King Doten gathers all these giants, and he rallies them around the rock for about 50 years. And so he's this very, very powerful figure there. Then along comes Magnan the Fierce, this chieftain of a particular cultural group. And he has a fairly long story that explains his rise to power, but basically, remnants of the lost kingdom of Ioth, that magical place that I was mentioning earlier, 4 sages arrive all the way from Ioth in Magnan's camp. He was just the chieftain of a settlement. He was a renowned hunter and warrior, but he wasn't any huge figure. He was just like, oh yeah, Magnan, he's pretty tough. And these 4 sages show up in the night. He lets them in. He hears their stories. And with their help, it wasn't even, I would say, feudalism at this point. Feudalism requires more established structures, or like at least actual chains of warlords of some kind. This was pre-feudalism. This is just individual family groups and clans. Until Magnan rolls up. So Magnan takes in these 4 sages from Ioth. They get his head full of ideas. He starts making a plan. He starts rallying. He starts using statecraft and diplomacy and a show of force, and starts building a coalition of these smaller encampments and tribes. And his whole story is posted. You can read the whole thing. TLDR, he tricks Dotin, the king of this giant king. He tricks him and kills him, and breaks up the giant army, which was the strongest force in the area. And based on that legend, he starts moving. He was sort of around here, and he just starts moving and gathering more and more of these settlements and encampments and warlords and such to his banner until he gets around here. This is the Siolach, by the way, this right here. This is the lake where Ziva, the dragon, lives, and where Ardalane's island is. So Magnan gets here, and when he gets here, he meets this other kingdom, Vercinget. And it's not a full-fledged kingdom, but it is kind of the next largest group. It was all these isolated individual groups with small alliances and stuff, but Vercinget is called the Citadel of Stone. They actually have really nice stone walls. And this is in a time where most fortifications were just wooden stakes in the ground, right? So you might hear them talk about the walls of Vercinget that stretched towards the sky, when in fact it was like a 15-foot stone wall, but there was no siege technology. There were no catapults. There were no siege towers. This was very like spears and round shields, and they didn't have much engineering tech. So Vercinget's stone walls were a huge deal. And Magnan is dead set on conquering them. It takes a long time. He ends up doing some skeezy things. TLDR, he does conquer Vercinget. And then he sails across the Siolach to the other side, to the feet of these mountains, and he builds a citadel there, which he names Galadron, which in the tongue of old means unyielding purpose. So he builds this big old castle, and this big old stronghold, and then he just keeps going when he's done. He keeps going as far as he can. He presses out into this area, and he ends up butting heads with the hobgoblins of the north, and eventually he dies. But he leaves sort of his empire to his children. And then for the next, where are we at? So here, Magnan conquers the rock. 30 years later, he dies after just spending 37 years conquering as much as he could, getting more and more of these little settlements under his control. The line of Magnan fails. So that is a gap of just shy of 400 years. So Galadron as a kingdom that we keep talking about, Galadron is all the land conquered by King Magnan and his descendants for about 300, 400 years. And you would probably define this, if we were looking at real-world history, as like one of the earliest feudal medieval kingdoms. Dark Ages. Like, if we were talking about its cultural roots, again, fall of Rome. If we're using the Demonic Imperium as the fall of Rome, except even more destructive because it was wiped out across the world immediately, and they were not... Like, they didn't leave a legacy of civil engineering like Rome did, so people were really starting from scratch. We're talking warriors with spears and wearing, like, furs and real Dark Ages stuff. So over those 400 years, these war chiefs and warlords and such, they start to become knights, because Magnan is the first king. King just descends from a title that basically means chief. So every single little village and settlement and family group had its own king. and there were just tons and tons of kings everywhere. Magnan conquered a bunch of people calling themselves king, but they were like the king of this valley, the king of this hill. So Magnan was one of the first big, large-scale kings, and I wouldn't say he invents feudalism, but he and his descendants implement feudalism on a large scale. Yeah, like pre-Charlemagne Franks. That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. And that is the setting that Castles and Casters Season 1 takes place in. And I don't really enforce the technology level because, again, players want plate mail. They want plate mail and they want crossbows, and that's fine. That's fun. Let's do that. I'm not going to say, now, before you play in this game, I have selected the following items from the player's handbook, which will not be made available to you, because if you look at the historical blah, 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 right? We're just sit down, roll some dice, fight some sheep, mess around with Gilbert. That's what the story is about. But when we're talking about world building, which is what I'm getting into now, the barons and dukes and the nobles of Galadron are only a few generations removed from tribal chieftains. So there's this very warrior-centric spirit to it. And I don't think Galadron would have jousts. I might put a joust in the campaign because a joust is fun, it's cool, but a joust is a much more like late medieval, early Renaissance pomp and circumstance. You'd be a lot more likely to see tournaments and melees, That's what you're more likely to see here. And the feast halls, the castles, they're going to be huge and elegant because magic and because I want it to look that way. But if you're looking for inspiration, look at Beowulf. Beowulf is a good example for like early Galadron. You've got the warriors and their feasting halls, and gift giving is a big important part of their culture. So what I want to do, now that I've spent like 40 minutes just explaining and talking about how we got here, I want to add some nobles to Galadron. I want to add some towns and castles, locations, that sort of thing. And now that I've sort of set the stage, we're not talking high medieval, we're talking early medieval. King Magnan's descendants, his last heir, Wigmund III, died in infancy. Now, one thing that, when I started writing this lore, I had not beefed up on my War of the Roses and my tutors and such. It is really hard to wipe out the last heir. You don't ever actually... okay, it can happen, but it's super rare to actually lose the last heir. What happens is, you run out of heirs who have a strong claim to the throne, because, unless you're playing CK2, which I really should play. I've only dipped my toes in the water, but like some of this stuff is going to sound real familiar for people who played CK2, especially like early game stuff. Yeah, this is right up that alley. So the actual last heir dying is rare, but what you do have is the king is, or queen is only, the monarch's only the monarch because everyone agrees that they're the monarch, unless you have magic on your side. And King Magnan did not have any sort of divine right to rule, by which I mean a literal deity showing up and saying, hey, you can have at, I'm actually giving you a divine right to rule, which could happen in Anakra, the world. So I don't necessarily have a family tree of King Magnan. What I do know is that 7 years before these two campaigns happen, the Quest for the Book of Dawn, the last heir of Magnan dies. It's possible that there are other heirs out there, but like I was saying, in feudalism, it's not like the king is all-powerful. The king, we've all read or watched Game of Thrones. The king is powerful as long as they have money and soldiers and people who are willing to back them up. The moment people turn against them or lose faith in the system, their position becomes vulnerable. So the fact that the line of Magnan actually held on for 300 years is that's not bad. That's probably unrealistic. Like, if you look at most empires and societies in the real world, last about, I think, 350 years is the average. And there have been longer dynasties, but most don't last that long. So the line of Magnan fails, and it's not just like, the actual the last direct descendant died without leaving an heir. I also think that people, probably the direct heirs died a while ago and the crown passed to like a cousin. It's not been a direct line. It's been like, well, this was the king died, so his brother's the king now, and then he's having a kid over here, so okay, now you're the king, and then like you married this person and then you died and they remarried someone else. Like, it gets really complicated, and the line of descendants that's only the rule because everyone said that's the rule, and they have to maintain actual political power to stay on that throne. So one way or another, the system collapsed 7 years ago. Everyone says it's because the last heir of Magnin died, but I haven't fully fleshed this out yet, but I'm guessing there have been a lot of factors leading up to the collapse of Galadron. And that's what set off the first quest in the beginning. When we were writing the first arc, Quest for the Book of Dawn, we weren't looking to do Game of Thrones, right? We weren't looking to do CK2. We were looking to do a fun story about a quest to find a magic book, to find a secret heir to the throne, because that will fix all the problems. But I like the background to have a lot of that cloak and dagger, complicated, difficult, intrigue stuff. I love that stuff. It doesn't always make the best content on paper because, again, people don't want to have to read a wiki to understand the plot. So what I want to do is I want to make some other nobles. And the nobles of Galadron, yeah, they might be sort of, your decadent nobles, but they all descend from these people who Magnin gave land. And you give land to people who give you money and soldiers, or who can fight well. So most of the nobles of Galadron would be descended from knights and warriors and chieftains and that sort of thing. Not all of them would have to. So I want these nobles to have histories that are tied to the line of Magnin, and they have very old school political power. Yeah, they could be really smart. Yeah, they could be like the master of coin, where they're all about money, but they're probably all about money because their ancestor fought in this battle or sold out. He was like, oh, well, I'm the leader of this one family in this clan, and the rest of the families don't want to join you, so I'm going to sell out the leader of the opposition to Magnin, betray him, join your side, get all the rest of my family members to go with me. Am I good at fighting? No, but I delivered you all this stuff, so now make me an earl, make me a great chief or something. And then you inherit a bunch of land, and then your descendants do well or do poorly with the land, and now 400 years later you're descended from this weasel, but you're actually really good lumberjacks. I don't know. That's sort of the vibe that I'm going for here. We're gonna go off base here instead of talking about nobles for a moment. A brief summary of the cosmology of Anakra. One of the design ideas behind Anakra, because I'm designing it for D&D as well as maybe fiction someday, eventually the novel, we'll see if it ever happens. One of the ideas is if it exists in D&D, it exists in Anakra. And I cribbed that from another world builder. It might have been D20 Monkey, who did Carthoon, which is a really cool setting, by the way. You should check it out. I don't remember. But somebody's world, they basically start out by saying if it exists in D&D, it exists in this world. The implication is that Anakra actually exists in the larger D&D multiverse. Like, technically it exists in the same reality as Faerun of the Forgotten Realms, which is implied to exist in the same reality as Ravenloft, as Oerth of Greyhawk, Cretan of Dragonlance, etc. It's not in the Forgotten Realms. It is not in the Forgotten Realms, because the Forgotten Realms is part of a larger cosmology. Like Faerun, it's implied you can travel from Faerun to Eberron, even though those two worlds have totally different planar cosmologies. It's like there's a multiverse here and a multiverse here, and somehow you can go between them. So I am leaving open the possibility that Anakra exists in this larger reality. Because one, if anyone else plays a game in Anakra, like, as soon as somebody's playing it at their table, it's theirs now. Whatever they say is canon at their table. So if they want to have Warforged from Eberron there, or they want to travel to Exandria, like, at that point it's out of my hands. But I want to leave vague and open the possibility that those other worlds are out there. But Anakra is also very, very far away from them. It's very isolated, very hidden. And it's floating in what I refer to as the Hungry Dark. And the Hungry Dark is the void. And it doesn't really have any inherent properties, per se. I don't think I've defined it as like life-draining or maddening. It's not the far realm. It's not, it's just emptiness. It's this infinite space. And there could be things out there, worlds and creatures out there, and things have come from the Hungry Dark to Anakra before. There's been 2 major incursions. The first was the Infernals. The Infernals showed up. Yeah, exactly. It's not like the WoW Void. It's not with, you don't have Void Lords, you don't have old gods in the Void. Old gods come from the Void, but it's more like they travel through the Void on their way. It's like outer space. It's like a cosmic, interdimensional, extraplanar version of outer space. So whatever you want to be out there could be out there. Like, it's I basically imply that the world of the Forgotten Realms is over here in the Hungry Dark, and, you know, Anakra's over here, so they both exist, but between them is actual void. So you've got the Hungry Dark, and then you've got Anakra inside that, and Anakra consists of the 4 kingdoms, which I've mentioned a few times. You've got the Sky Kingdom, which is like castles on clouds. It's very much like Jack and the Beanstalk looking. You've got the Mortal World, which is, you're looking at it, there's more to it, but this is the Mortal World. Galadron, Amon Krok, they're all in the Mortal World. You've got the Other World, which is the Feywild. I never call it the Feywild. I call it Fairy. Or if you're in, say, Okarthal or Kast across the sea, they call it the Spirit World. But it's the Feywild. It's like a parallel version of the Mortal World, but crazier and more magical, and distances change and all that stuff. And then you've got the Underworld. And one of the things about Anakra is it's isolated from the rest of the universe, but these 4 planes of existence, there's no other planes of existence in it. Okay, there are. Dream is the 5th kingdom, for example. But in the D&D cosmology, you've got like 16 different outer planes and all these different worlds. In Anakra, instead, what you do is, instead of having 10 different lower planes, like hell worlds, that are all separate planes of existence, you just say they all are different domains within the underworld. So each of these 4 kingdoms can contain all sorts of stuff, like demi-planes and realms and dominions that are just huge in size. So if you want to add something there, if you want your players to go to Avernus or the 9 Hells, you just say that is a domain within the underworld, for example. So you can just kind of plug that in there. But the 4 kingdoms, they're very close. You could get swept up in a tornado and end up in the Sky Kingdom. There are some mountains that are so high that if you climb them when the clouds are passing through, you can climb through and end up on top of a cloud. The Sky Kingdom, it's not like you look up and you literally see it. It's more like the clouds end up being portals to it. So if you go through the cloud, it might be a little wisp of cloud, but when you get to the top of it, it's this huge rolling mass of cloud with castles and forests of smog and all sorts of weird stuff on it. So the Sky Kingdom is, and there's actual magic beanstalks that literally go to giant castles. A lot of giants live in the Sky Kingdom. The other world, the Fairy World, if you go out on a moonlit night when it's misty in the winter, you could get swept up into the Fairy World. If you step on a toadstool, you could end up in the Fairy World. If you go down to the creek when the river maidens are washing their hair and you touch them, you could end up in the Spirit World. There's a lot of different ways to end up in the fairy otherworld. Like, there may not be very many planes of existence, but they're all very close to each other, and it's really easy. Like, magic flows between them. Everybody knows that these fantastic other worlds are right around the corner. If you go into the wrong cave, you could end up in the underworld, in the land of the dead. So these kingdoms are very closely connected. Galadronian, nobles, towns, and stuff. Alright, so what do we know about Galadron? We know there is big capital city by the Siolach, the big inland freshwater lake. We know that it's got nobles descended from Magnan's faithful loyalists, warlords, weasels. I like the idea of he meets somebody who like helps him navigate a really difficult forest or something like that. Trackers, wilderness folk, mystics. So the nobles of Galadron, they might be more refined now. They might be less combat ready, but they're descended from these, like, whoever was useful to Magnan and his descendants. Not every single one of them would be like directly related to somebody who helped Magnan. It's been 400 years. Stuff could have happened. We know that it's early feudalism. Let's see. Feudalism. So noble power equals military might, economic might, political power. Land equals wealth. Religion. So I've actually struggled a little bit with the religion in my world. One, because I did a lot of religious world building like 3,000, 2,000 years in the future when the religious place has totally changed. I would say that it's a religious society, but it's more of a pagan, if you want to think of it in terms of real world analogs, it's more pagan. There's no state religion. There's no Christianity equivalent, for example. Alright, religions. Balvoral, infernal cults dedicated to the infernals. Uzul is worshipped as a war god. So, even though Ramius banished all the infernals to the underworld and destroyed the demonic imperiums, it's not like the infernals don't still have power. In fact, we've seen Uzul mess up a lot of things through his followers. One of the things that happened when Ramius rewrote the rules of the world is fiends can no longer travel of their own volition between worlds. They can't just pop up, but they can come when summoned. So the laws of the universe prevent them from using their own abilities to arrive in the mortal world unless they are bound to a mortal or a mortal uses magic to call them. So they're constantly attempting to get people to summon them, to tempt them and trick them, so on and so forth, so that they can manifest their power. It's also why they like to work through warlocks, because they can't just plane shift herky-jerky between the mortal world and the underworld, but if they have a warlock, they can speak to that warlock mentally and in their mind, get them to do stuff, get them to summon, get them to be a minion. Alright, so some nobles would actually be secretly worshipping these, they might be in these secret cults, or they might worship Uzul as a war god, not as like, you know, the demon bad guy, but they just say, well, Uzul's a leader, and he's powerful, and he's got good weaponry, and as a culture, we value those things, so we worship Uzul. And then we have the Zaelarian faith. So this is something I mentioned earlier. During the Demonic Imperium, when the Infernals ran the world, a very strong culture rose up in Brontha, this sort of dry grasslands near the equator territory that worships Zaelar, who's personified as a phoenix. He's called the Sunrider. He's a titan. He's the offspring of Sin al-Gawar, possibly Sin and Vindur. And so he's this deity of light and fire and strength and healing and rebirth and cleansing. And so this very zealous society developed in Brontha in direct opposition to the demonic imperiums, actually resisted being conquered for a while. So I think some version of the Zaelarian faith has made it to Galadron. But it's not what you would call like orthodox. It's not the exact same way that Zaelar's worshipped in Brontha. So the deities of Anakra, I tried to do it fairly differently from most worlds. You've got the sovereigns up at the probably the top, with some exceptions. You've got the sovereigns, the four elemental gods of creation. You've got their immediate offspring, the Titans. But what does or doesn't count as a deity. It's not one of those clear, like, oh, you were a person and now you're a god, and those are like different species. A deity is a very flimsy sort of thing here. You could have a god of this river, this one river right here. This little river has a god, and we're going to use the word god to talk about them. You could also use the word spirit, right? It's God as a title isn't as clear-cut as it is in other worlds. And there is this idea that there's a lot of animism or pantheism going on in Anakra. There could be a god of this forest, a god of this mountain, a god of this wind, so on and so forth. The world is alive with all these different spirits and deities. And most of them dwell in the other world or in the mortal world, sort of phasing between here and the other world. So it's not like the Forgotten Realms where you've got, yeah, the Forgotten Realms has a lot of gods, but there's a few of them that are like, yeah, Lathander in some variety exists everywhere, and he's the god of this abstract thing. So are the sovereigns active, or are they asleep, away, dead, disinterested? The sovereigns are very personalized in this world. They are larger than life. They are extremely active. And this is sort of a change from their early history. In their early history, they did sort of a clockwinder idea. They existed, they were the elements, but they wanted life to just do its own thing. And that lasted until the first invasion of the Infernals back during the era of Dawn. And after that, sort of when they decided to be more hands-on, they had to split the Dawn world into the 4 kingdoms, they had to shape the mortal world, they had to get a lot busier. Of the 4 deities, Arakura, the sovereign of the earth, is dead. And by dead, I mean discorporated. Again, sort of, you can still, if you are a cleric of Arakura, you'll still get spells, because you're getting your spells from the earth itself. But the other sovereigns can literally show up. Like, you can go visit Vindur, the sovereign of the skies. He's in the floating citadel of Terra Nimbus, in the Sky Kingdom. They're all shapeshifters. And none of them have like a strictly defined gender. Some of them will favor one form over another, but they're all these larger, beyond our comprehension entities, but they like to manifest themselves, and they have emotions that we can sort of understand. So Vindur is this big, like, he usually goes looking like a Zeus sort of figure. He's the father of all giants. He's jealous, and he's suspicious, and he brooks no resistance to his rule, and his rage is as wild as the storms. Liban, the sovereign of the seas, was completely tempestuous and free and individualistic and defiant and sort of the most hands-off of the sovereigns. Until the Vindur is missing a horse, the horse of the south wind. That's why, like, if you're gonna piss off a sovereign, don't piss off any of them. Really, don't piss off Vindur. He's like Zeus without being as horny as Zeus is, but at the same level of like jealousy and pettiness, and that rises from when Arakura was killed. Arakura's death changed the way that the sovereigns see the world entirely. So Vindur, as soon as Arakura died, started incel Zeus. Not entirely true. He does have kids. As a very important child, Raelta is a Titan, the offspring of Liban and Vindur, and she is the... has she done her thing yet? I don't know. Anyways, she's a star goddess. She's very important. They felt immortal and eternal and inevitable beforehand. And then when Arakura died, again, Arakura still exists, but a lot of her personality and ability to manifest her will is gone. Vindur responded by building a giant stronghold and conquering the entire Sky Kingdom. Like, he is of all the 4 kingdoms, the underworld, large parts of it are controlled by Ramius, but not the whole thing. Vindur actively sends out the Knights of Terra Nimbus and his giants to conquer territory, conquer Cloud Islands, make everyone follow his rules, and it's out of this sense of paranoia and fear. So he wants to control everything and just be undisputed there so that no threat can rise against him. Yeah, exactly. So that's how he responded. Liban, who again was like, fuck the rest of you, I'm gonna go live in the ocean and do my own thing, and no one's gonna constrain me with any rules or whatever. I'm water. So what happened with Liban is, let's see, death of Arakura, apotheosis of Ramius. So after the Sovereigns broke up the Dawn World and made it into the Four Kingdoms, the reason they did that was they needed to seal off Anakra from the rest of the multiverse, from the Hungry Dark, because the Infernals came from outside. And they are the ones who mess everything up. So the Sovereigns divided the world into these four kingdoms that interlock together to make a protective barrier called the Firmament, so that things can't come from outside. The Sovereigns, their original history is very mysterious. It's tied up in the creation of Anakra, which rose from the world before. As far as most people understand, when Anakra came to be, they also came to be, because they are the elements, and without them, there's just not stuff. So because there's stuff, the Sovereigns exist. Alright, so the Sovereigns divided the Dawn World into the four kingdoms and locked them together to make the Firmament so that nothing else could enter Anakra from beyond. Then Arakura was killed. When Arakura was killed, the Firmament weakened because it rose from the will of the Sovereigns. So Arakura is killed, the demons rampage across the world, and Ramius later on, he rewrites the Emerald Tablets, makes himself the overlord of the dead, banishes all the fiends, alright, but the Firmament that protects Anakra from everything else is still weak. So what happens is, and the blood of, like, Arakura was sort of the keeper of the blood of life, which is the source of life force for new beings. So when Arakura was killed, like, that, basically the smell of raw, the cosmic, supernatural, not literal smell of raw, spilled life force bled out. It leaked out into the Hungry Dark. And that attracted the One Flesh, which is basically a parasite, a horrific, Lovecraftian, old god style parasite that, and it's huge. It's like the size of a meteor, right? It's called the One Flesh. It's just this incomprehensible mass of hunger and flesh and tendrils and proboscis, more like mosquito proboscis than tentacly. And it was drawn to Anakra by the smell of this blood. And Liban, the Sovereign of the Sea, was just living their life, and then this thing enters, squeezes through the Firmament and just falls, and it's going to hit the earth and just burrow in and start drinking, like a flea, like a parasite, drinking the life essence that it smells. So Liban sees it coming. Vindor's just like panicked and trying to run shit. Liban sees it coming, grabs a continent-sized chunk of the mortal world, rips it up, waits for the One Flesh to get in range, and just smacks it out of the sky. Just bludgeons it, crushes it beneath this small continent, and then crushes it to the bottom of the ocean and goes under there and just starts wrestling with it. And for the last 300 years? Roughly 300 years, Liban and the One Flesh have been locked into combat. And bits and pieces of, so Liban went from being, I'm not in charge, I have no responsibilities, I don't care, to wrestling an eldritch horror at the roots of the earth. And when bits and pieces of the One Flesh break off, they spread and they become aberrations. So you got your Beholders, your Mind Flayers, your Aboleths, the Kraken that was referenced in Phaeton's backstory from One Last Ride, is a spawn, a piece of, it rose from a piece of the One Flesh that broke off. Liban's the one who like noticed it and went under there, and because it's under the water, Vindor, who's the Sovereign of the Skies, can't help. It's not his element, not his territory. And Sin Al-Gawar, the Sovereign of Flame, who's the last person we're going to talk about, again, it sort of took him all by surprise. Liban noticed it and just, there wasn't a lot of time to react. It's not like they tracked it coming through. It's like Liban noticed something was wrong, saw it falling, reacted, smashed it, and the Sovereign of Fire can't help at the bottom of the ocean. So mostly Liban's just solo tanking it. Vindor is being paranoid, conquering everything. After the One Flesh landed and Liban was wrestling with it, Sin Al-Gawar, the Sovereign of the Fire, kind of got sick of everything. Sin originally, he's a very Promethean figure. When the world was young, so during the Dawn era, the earliest phase of Anakra's history, the reason everyone talks about it, the reason it's such a big deal, is because during the Dawn era, like will and emotion and physical reality were all tied together. So wishes came true. You could like all entities that existed there could shape themselves. They could shape the world around them. The magic and physical matter were one and the same, and they were all tied in. So you could have anything you want, be anyone you want, do anything you wanted. It was this paradise of unimaginable beauty, and that's what the Infernals were drawn to. But there were no mortals during that time, because all the minds, the sentiences that existed during that time were otherworldly beings. Oh, that felt good. So when the mortal world was created by separating the Dawn world into these different kingdoms, that's when your elves and humans and dwarves and everything else appeared, each in their own way. And Sin, again, he took on the role of Prometheus. He took a liking to these mortal creatures, and he decided to teach them how to make fire. Nobody chained him to a rock and said a vulture to eat his liver forever, but he spent a lot of his time traveling, visiting all the, like these families and groups of people that just popped up, and teaching them fire and some of the basics of life and some magic and a little bit about the world. He was this educational figure, wandered around sort of taking them under his wing. He wouldn't rule over them. He'd just sort of show up, share some knowledge and lore and wisdom with them, and then move on and look for the next group. So Sin was extremely active, traveling the world. Then he sort of became disillusioned over time as things went wrong after thing went wrong after thing went wrong, and his reaction to the death of Arakura was basically to say, fine, I'll do Thanos style, fine, I'll do it myself. And after the One Flesh descended, Sin went here to Isatum, to the great desert of what is now called Sharon. And it was the ruins of Ioth. Again, Ioth was this magical mecca that fell in a civil war, and ended up, its survivors founded Cryas. And they taught the secrets of dawn magic there. Ioth was an elven archmage who still had the secrets of dawn magic from the Dawn era, tried to share that with humans. Some things went wrong. A civil war ended up destroying the culture. The survivors went to Cryas. They took the Book of Dawn, which is what the heroes of the first campaign were looking for. And it just sort of left Ioth a ruin. And it left all the fallout from the Civil War, and the One Flesh came. It was a bad scene. So what Sin ends up doing after the One Flesh, and again about 400, 300 years before the quest for the Book of Dawn begins, is he just lands in this maelstrom of fire, glasses a lot of the desert, and builds his own city. And just says, all right, I try to just share knowledge with everybody, but we keep going backwards, things keep falling apart, I'm going to do this myself. And so he goes from being this Promethean figure trying to just say, hey, here's some, I'm going to set fire, kindle civilization and let it loose, to I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to play with everyone, and they're going to do it exactly the way I. So he became a railroading dungeon master. And he created one of the most the Wise Tyrant, exactly. He said, we are going to drag you towards, like, development and civilization, whether you like it or not. And he founded the great civilization of Sharon. And at the time of One Last Ride, our most recent campaign, Sharon is still ruled by Sin Al-Gawar, the Sovereign of Fire. He is physically in that city, running shit. So Sharon is this incredibly developed, incredibly sophisticated, not particularly free society. But it's a technological and cultural wonder of the world. How long have you been developing your world? So what happened was, I've been DMing and world building before then for over 20 years. And every single time that I've done it, I've made like a little bit of a world here. I've made a bunch of different campaign settings, and it was usually I draw a map and come up with some basic stuff, and I was 12 at the time, so there were a lot of fire swords involved. I spent a lot of high school and college doing online role play, and I made up worlds for that. I did lore creation for that. So I've dabbled here and there and had all these different projects. And a couple of years ago, I started a D&D campaign. I was going to make a dark fairy tale style campaign with a bunch of my friends. I invited 10 of them, because obviously they're not all going to be able to show up. We all have lives. And they all said yes. So I ended up with 9 players in my party, which don't do that. Don't recommend. But I I reiterated on some ideas from a previous campaign, and I started doing it, and then I looked at my buddy, Ninja Man Matt, who is my old friend. We've been world building together for years, and I suddenly realized, you know, I could take each setting that I've designed, except for the one with robots, like all the fantasy settings I designed. If I actually took all of them and used all of them, I would have enough material. Instead of having all these fragmented worlds, I'd actually have enough stuff for a cohesive campaign setting. So Anakra is built from pieces, like it's been in the works, I'd say, for like 20 years, but not as a cohesive project. It's sort of all the scraps and bits and pieces finally combined into one place. All right. How much do I have to slide across you to put an Air Genasi in the lore? Air Genasi are in the lore. They do exist canonically in the setting, in the world. If you want to add a particular one, you've been a huge supporter of the stream and such for a while, so hit me and I'll see if I can put it in. A lot of our Genasi are related to genies. And genies in Anakra, when the sovereigns were sort of shaping the world, they needed help. So some of the first offspring of the sovereigns were the giants to do the heavy lifting, the dwarves to do the fine details. Remember how Alaka is a river dwarf? Dwarves, there are 8 different varieties of dwarf in Anakra, 2 for every element. Mountain and hill dwarves are descended from earth, river and sea dwarves are descended from water, ember and sand dwarves are descended from fire, and ice and snow dwarves are descended from air. No, ice and wind dwarves. No, snow dwarves? I think it's snow dwarves and wind dwarves. So there's a lot of different dwarven cultures. They don't all live underground. But what I'm getting to is that genies were sort of the will of the sovereigns, the knowledge and lore of the sovereigns. And and so there are Genasi out there. Many of them are the offspring of genies. Many of them are in the Western continent. They have their own thing going on, but Genasi are definitely canonical. Next question, the Golden Bough one-shots. How connected are they to this world / current campaigns? So the Golden Bough one-shots, in my head, all occur in the world of Anakra, mostly in the Northern Kingdoms, and whether they tie into the main plot line or not varies. The last Golden Bough one-shot that we did, the Fooltide adventure, that was set in the capital of Galajon. And it was sort of part of the political upheavals of all of that. And a very important person who should not have died did die. So that actually happened. Whether or not the campaign will go to the capital of Galajon and we'll see the fallout remains to be seen. But in my head, they're as canonical. I try to make them as canonical as possible. I'm trying to work hard on making my own world. What are some of the best world building tools in your opinion? The world building subreddit has fantastic resources. It all depends on what interests you about world building. Because again, you can literally start with continental drift and the mineral makeup of your planet and the orbit of your planet and the nature of the stars nearby, or you can say it's all flat and it's on a turtle's back, right? So figure out the parts of world building that are most interesting to you. But when it comes to resources, the world building subreddit has access to tons of great resources and some really cool threads. There's a great thread about medieval demographics that I love, that I have hot linked. So like this is a thread that I found super useful for world building. So the world building subreddit, definitely recommend. There's some good, they have a Discord server, which is great. The World Anvil Discord server is super helpful. World Anvil as a resource in general is super helpful. World Anvil does YouTube videos on different things like politics and cultural development and Dark Ages, and they have a bunch of YouTubers who sort of do world building related content. You can find a lot of great resources there. I use Google Docs to draft my stuff, World Anvil to store and organize my stuff, and those resources I mentioned, plus Wiki, a lot of Wiki, to develop and research and hone things. So those are my favorite resources. No Dwergar Dark Dwarves. If it exists in D&D, it exists in Anakra. So those dwarves do exist. The exact lore... So we do have something that I cribbed from my friend Knight of Omicron. So there's sort of 2 people who I've done a lot of world building with, and they've collaborated with me over the years. Ninja Man Matt has been there since like '06. A lot of the lore he's helped me develop. I bounce ideas off of him. He's come up with some stuff. And Knight of Omicron has his own world building going on, but some of the stuff in this world is stuff from a shared role-playing experience that we did online and some of his ideas and such. So he made up something called the Khazar, which are rust dwarves, entropy dwarves. And in my head, in Anakra, the rust dwarves, the Khazar, they are it's like, so a rust dwarf would be descended from earth dwarves that instead of creating and shaping earth, they corrode, destroy, and consume it. So they're usually the outcome of infernal contamination, or more likely, they came in contact with the one flesh. And so they're dedicated to entropy and such. You could use Dwergar or Darrow for that, or we might come up with some custom Khazar at some point, but they definitely exist. The one shot that we did with Avril, Pixie, Danny Bear, and Achilleos actually involved the Khazar. And it took place, I want to say over here, in Lyteri, which is one of the northern kingdoms. How do you go about players knowing what their character should know, especially when you may not have world-built some of those said things yet? So, one thing that I do, if I haven't world-built something, there are games outside of D&D that give players a lot more narrative control. They give players the ability to make up facts about the world. And that can be a really exciting gameplay experience when you do that. Let's take Castles and Casters as an example. Casters and Castles. I know everything there is currently to know about the world of Anakra. I do not want my players to have to read thousands and thousands of words to play in the game. So I've handled this a couple different ways. When they encounter something, if there's knowledge that would be relevant that their character should know, I share it with them immediately. Or that's where you have knowledge skills like Arcana, History, Nature, and Religion kick in. Other things you can do, and this is something that I did that I'm very happy with how this turned out. During one of the episodes of Season 2, I gave each player a handout with some pieces of lore and information their character specifically would know based on the backstory that they wrote for their characters. I made sure that lore was helpful. Either it was really important to solving the challenges in their way and uncovering mysteries, or it presented possible options. So remember how the party went to Kiladar's Trail to fix the ley line? That was one. I planted a bunch of different plot threads. There were a bunch of different places they could have gone and things they could have done, and I seeded those in these handouts I gave midway through the campaign of information the players would know. And the reason I gave them those handouts is because there's this annoying thing where somebody rolls a knowledge check, and as the dungeon masters, you say to them, okay, Doa, your character, Bendis Rambletoon, knows blah, 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 blah. And then Doa sits there and he turns to the players and says, hey guys, blah, 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 blah. It's silly, it breaks immersion. By giving the players these bits and pieces, not paragraphs, not huge chunks, but like bullet points of useful information and handing it to them, they as a player got to sound smart. They got to know things that their character would know, they wouldn't otherwise know, and it sounded like it just came from them and they knew it, instead of doing the whole DM parroting thing. So if there's relevant lore, actionable, I think the key is actionable, lore that can actually help the players make cool choices and do cool things, and is directly relevant to the adventure you're on, preparing quick handouts and giving them to the players, I think is one way to handle that. When I may not have world built some of those said things yet, I either make it up on the spot, hand wave it away, or give the players an opportunity to contribute. I think it's a good way to keep them invested in the game. If some of the stuff that some of their ideas can be canon and I have room for it and it won't ruin everything, I like to incorporate that stuff. So there are real world consequences. Yeah, as much as possible, whenever possible, I want the events of the one-shots to happen in the world. Like the Wild Sheep Chase. That had some in-game effect, and I know it wasn't a one-shot. It sort of had like some of the core cast members and some special guest stars and stuff, but the idea is I want all this to contribute to a living world. And when people come on for Golden Bough, I'd love to reference, like in my head it happened, it all happened, but a lot of them happen far from each other, so opportunities to directly incorporate them is going to be a little bit tricky. but bits and pieces are left from the world before, which, what was that world? Whatever you want it to be. I've got some stuff from Forgotten Realms in this world, at least one thing. I'm probably never going to write it into like an official wiki, or if I ever try to make official Anakra content, like a Shardalon, I'm going to have to remove him because he's specific to the Forgotten Realms. But in one version of my headcanon, the world before was Golarion, the Pathfinder world, or the Forgotten Realms. And at the end of its natural life cycle, some stuff happened that I'm keeping secret, and the world was born anew, the latest in the cycle. And so there is one piece left of the world before, and that is the Silent City. That is where they went in the Fifth Kingdom. This, in the middle of like a black and white, no, when you go there, there's no color at all. This mount, it's like Minas Tirith if it was just in the middle of an empty plain instead of on the edge of a mountain series. So it's this city that rises heaped up on itself, and there's a staircase that goes all the way up to the top, and along this staircase are 7 gates. And Tiberius opened the first gate, and when he opened the first gate long ago, he learned the spell he used to split Hotan's astral self from her physical self and defeat her. And in that gate was bound the dragon Ashardalon. And the legends have it that in the Dawn world, when the Infernals invaded and the Sovereigns didn't intervene, there was a great war between the Infernals and the creatures of light that dwelt there. They weren't like the Naru, they weren't these Archons of Order, they were more just like fairies, like the primal fairies that could take any shape they wanted and just sort of enjoyed reality and explored at these new, fresh minds. There was this primal war, and TLDR, the Infernals won. They destroyed Luminius, the City of Light, like the first great civilization before physical laws of reality were implemented. The Jewel of the Dawn. There's a lot of legends about Luminius. It's this primal myth in Anakra. So the Infernals, through a series of tragic events, defeated and destroyed Luminius. And because this wasn't a physical world, because willpower could shape reality, I don't say that it's not like they sacked the city, they consumed the city. They devoured its light. And Uzul was able to start, once he devoured it, he and his minions were able to just start reshaping the world in their own image. That's what drew them to Anakra in the first place. This raw potential, this raw power, this ability to shape it and do with it as they please, and to take it from these innocent minds that dwelt there before and make them do whatever they wanted and twist them and have power over them. And they were winning. They won. They were scattering the children of Luminius. They were just devouring everything and reshaping all of Anakra in their own image. And the Laughing God, who with the Sovereigns is the oldest deity in Anakra and the least understood. The Laughing God is sometimes called Fortune's Father or Lady Luck. It's a deity of chance, of gambling, of good and bad fortune, and of wine and song and just enjoying life. What was his name? Bob Treloop in the Sheep one-shot was, I think, a cleric of the Laughing God. And the Laughing God is one of those deities that is recognized all over the world. Some deities are highly regionalized, but every culture has some version of the Laughing God. Some see it as male, some as female, some as like a mischievous animal, but everyone has some version of the gambler's god. So the Laughing God went to the Silent City, which existed even in the Dawn realm. Even in the Dawn world, that empty city with its 7 gates was there. And the Laughing God opened all 7 gates, and inside the 7th gate were the dragons of the world before that had been imprisoned there, and they were unleashed, and they just crushed the Infernals, scattered them, drove them apart, and that was long enough for the Sovereigns to reshape the world and have some hope to fight back. So all that is to say, that city is where Tiberius went and where he returned. But when he went there, the 5th kingdom is Dream, right? It's a psychic realm. And it wasn't created by the sovereigns. It was sort of an accident. They built the 4 kingdoms. They're like, all right, cool, we're good. And then mortals showed up, and from the minds of mortals, this 5th kingdom of Dream just appeared or was discovered. It's kind of beyond their ken. The Silent City is not in the 5th kingdom. They reached it by traveling through the 5th kingdom. It doesn't really exist in any of the 4/5 kingdoms. It doesn't follow the normal rules. It's a highly unnatural, supernatural place. But one of the ways you can get there is traveling through Dream. So their minds traveled to the Silent City, and they were able to mess with it there. So, first answer to your question. When Tiberius wanted to set off a magical nuke empowered by chaos, he did not blow up Dream, which would have probably, I think what that would have done is driven a bunch of people insane, had given a bunch of people nightmares, or just had them, like a bunch of people who were sleeping would have just instantly died. I think that's how I would have handled that. But the explosion did not go off in Dream. It went off in the Silent City. This pocket dimension, this non-dimension that is all that remains of the world before. There will be consequences for this, and I intend to explore them in Arc 3. But yeah, anyways, that's to answer that question. CNC is my first experience with D&D, and I'm loving the campaigns and the characters. Thank you. I appreciate that. One of the things I'm really enjoying about this project is how many people have decided to try DMing or try playing for the first time. D&D is it's been my hobby for 20 plus years. I love it. I love it so much. It brings so much joy to my life, and the more people get excited about it and get to enjoy it, the happier I am. Dang, yeah, it's always cultists, dude. Liquid pain and otherwise. I think you're gonna like the adventure I have in mind. I'm gonna give you a shot at payback for a very unfair turn of events you had last time. If it exists indeed, it exists. If it exists indeed, it exists in Anakra. Does that include Ravnica? So, the way I treat it is this. It is hinted or implied that you've got Anakra here, floating in the vast omniverse, and somewhere out there, beyond the Hungry Dark, is Ravnica and the Magic the Gathering universe. I'm never going to formally write about it that way, right? I'm never going to deliberately inject Magic the Gathering or Ravnica into Anakra's lore. But the door's open. Stuff has come from the Hungry Dark before. The Infernals, the One Flesh. It's not always going to be bad stuff. It can't be evil stuff forever. There's a lot of stuff out there. So the door's open. I'm not writing it, but the door's open. This makes me so excited. I'm way behind on chat, guys. I talk a lot. I apologize. This makes me so excited to keep building out my world, but gosh, is it daunting. The nice thing about that is when it comes to world building, there's no end goal. It's not a thing. You never sit back and say, I can rest now. The labor is done. It is complete. I got there. It's not like a novel where you write the novel and then you publish the novel and you're like, well, that's the novel. And if I don't like it, it doesn't matter. It's out there now. Unless you publish a source book, world building is something you just do as long as you want to. And like, the amount of detail you can infuse is unlimited. So don't think of it as, oh my god, it's this insurmountable task, there's so much to do. Think of it as a thing you spend time enjoying that will always be there, that you can just keep doing as much as you want. There's no end goal. But there is a drive to do more. There's a drive to fill in the gaps. Like, I can see so many gaps, especially because I did a ton of political world building for this area 3,000 years in the future, which means that casters and castles set here in what we'll call the past, the present, but like in my head sometimes it's the past. A lot of it's blank. There's a lot of work. I have so many noble houses and stuff that I made for the third day. Anakra right now in Castles and Casters is in what we're calling, what will eventually be called the first day. The first age, the first day. But nobody calls it that yet because the thing that changes from one day to the other hasn't happened yet. So like there's all these holes, and I see the gaps and I see the flaws, and I see, there's so much more detail I can add. That just means I can spend more time doing a thing I enjoy. It doesn't mean I'm behind. I'm the only one setting the goal. Yeah, tiny, bit by bit, 100%. The other thing, Pupil of the Iris, that depends is, what are you world building for? If you're world building just for your own sake, just for the joy of creation, then yeah, let that anxiety, like if you can take that anxiety about the size of the task and use that to empower yourself to do more and to dig in, try to farm that and harness that, but don't worry about it. If you're world building to run a game, it's sort of a whole different animal, because the amount of information there is about the world of Anakra is like, there's a lot. This has been in the works for a long time. And the amount of this that is going to come up in our live shows, or even the amount of this that has come up in our live shows, is like, or that should come up, is like this much. And that is okay. A lot of world building is something I do for my own joy, because I want it to exist. When the players walk into a town, I want to know what it smells like and what the farmers there do, and sort of what what's on their minds, and where they go to church, and how they see the world, and what happened there 500 years ago. I want to know all that stuff, but that doesn't need to be on the stream. It doesn't need to be in the game. All that needs to happen is when the players walk there, I want them to feel like the place is alive. I want it to come to life. I want them to get this impression that there's this vast depth to it. They don't have to explore it. They don't have to ask everyone their life story, because they're doing it because the game and the adventure is what the players do and what we all do together. The adventure is not the lore or the world building. The adventure is the thing that happens when the players are together and they're bouncing off of each other and they're having fun and rolling dice and crazy things are happening. Like, that's the story. The lore is either there for me and for the people who are into it, or it's there to service that. So the amount of world building you have to actually do to run a game is very different from what you might think. And I would recommend Matt Colville's videos, his Running the Game series, for the difference between lore and story is a really good one. And just when he talks about world building for running a game and like what actually has to be done, he has a great sequence on that. Highly recommended. Starting small is nice. I feel like I started too big on my homebrew campaign world, and now I'm filling in all the gaps as I go. Yeah, no, mood. When I do world building, I tend to think of like, okay, tell me about the creation of history and the planes and the great cosmic balance and the gods. I always start with like the myth arcs. Whereas to run a game, what you need is a town and a dungeon and like a local authority of some kind. So if you have this huge map, you don't have to fill it in to run a game. This is actually something that I want to try to do in the next arc of Casters and Castles, because both of the stories we've told so far involve a lot of running around and going from place to place. I would love to try to do an arc with a smaller focus. It's like, we're not going to travel from here to here to here to here. We're going to stay in this place, and like really all the adventure is going to happen here. Because I've created a lot of NPCs that don't really get a lot of mileage. Like, I made Arwia and Lanre, whose name I accidentally stole from Patrick Rothfuss, which it happens. And I made these characters, but the players never really sank their teeth into those characters and those relationships. Now, I think part of that is because they had really great dynamics in the party, which is more important, right? It's more important that that happen than that they interact with my NPCs, because they're having fun, a cool story is being had, and our audience is entertained. That matters more. But what I would like to see is, I'd like a game where like the players, their characters grew up there, and they really have a sense of roots and presence in the setting, so we can do more subtle small stuff, you know, like a mystery or an intrigue, something beyond we have to travel to the Dotan's Rock to complete the quest. Though given that they summoned a Chardalon, we'll see what happens. He could have killed millions by blowing it upstream. Yeah, 100%. That could have happened. Thank you for answering these questions so thoroughly. It's my pleasure. I love this stuff. This is not what Castles and Casters is about. Again, it's about the magic of what happens when everyone's around the table being characters and making laughs. But I love talking about this stuff. I love answering these sorts of questions. As the off-season continues and travel schedules and stuff are there, we're still putting together our content schedule for until Overwatch League starts up again. So we might do some more of these streams. And if not, you can join our Discord. I'm always down to chat about this stuff when I'm available in Discord or on Twitter. I blame Gnomes for a newfound D&D addiction. Why did I make that story so far in the future? I didn't. That story was set in the present, and when Bren and Sideshow were like, hey, we want to do a D&D campaign, but we don't have time to write it. We know you're into D&D. Will you write for us? I basically pitched them 5 different story ideas. And I knew I was going to use Anakra because I know Anakra. And also it's my baby and I wanted to show it off. But I knew I was going to use it because I knew I could run a campaign there. And I pitched some ideas. And one idea I had was the quest for the Book of Dawn. At the time, was a historical mythic legend. It was like an Arthurian. It was like if we were in the on the cusp of the Renaissance at that point in the timeline. The quest for the Book of Dawn was like the quest for the Holy Grail. It was this Arthurian legend at that point. And I was like, you know what would be cool? As our pitch for the standard heroic fantasy quest, what if we looked at that? What if we went back there and sort of saw how it happened and I ran a game? No, I didn't say any of this to Brendan Sideshow. I didn't say, hey, why don't we do this historical thing? I just said, one of the adventures I'm pitching is the quest for the Book of Dawn, where you're going to go on a noble quest, classic adventure, travel across the land, blah, blah, blah. But in my head, it was, why don't I take an event from my world's timeline and use that as an adventure? And we did. And then sort of, it went from there into this is now the setting, because we have all these characters and things going on at this time. So I ended up putting myself thousands of years in the past. I'm not too worried about time paradoxes and stuff, because I can always just write things different, right? I can always just change some of the stuff that happens. So I'm not too worried about it, but it does mean that a lot of the work that I did is less useful. It's a D&D campaign, but the campaign is just in a small part of the world, which I have mostly flesh. Great. That's the exact way to do it. I used to do scraps of world building when I used to play around with campaign scenario editors in various games. The stream has made me want to start looking into doing that again. Thank you. I'm super happy to hear that. It is a fantastic hobby. I love it. Absolutely love it. And there's some great communities out there. I hope that it brings you a ton of joy. And the chaos when 10 subs get dropped. Yeah. That... I just love when random stuff happens. And sometimes it's hard for the acts of God to have an immediate impact. It's always tricky, right? Because when you're writing for a stream, it's like if I was just writing for my table and I had an act of God system set up, it's like, okay, the adventure is now whatever happens. Like the adventure is what happens at the table. And I try to be, I don't like railroading my party. I always write campaigns with these big mythic arcs and story arcs in mind, but I like to give the party freedom to do their own stuff. Whatever the party's interested in, that's a story. But when you're writing for a stream, you very much have to have like a dramatic arc in mind, because every stream is an episode. It's like you have to have something cool has to happen. You have to end on a cool note. When you're playing like an old school D&D game, you can have a session that's literally just exploring the wilderness or clearing out rooms of the dungeon. And some cool stuff will happen and some exciting stuff will happen, but it's not going to be structured like an episode of a TV show. So I have to write the adventures in such a way that there's discrete scenes where things will happen, but those scenes are not scripted. You know, it's not like I never know what the players are going to do, but I have to create scenarios that are like, okay, this one's going to be I want an action-packed opening, so we're going to have this thing happen. What's going to happen? I didn't, like in episode 2, I was like, okay, they're going to have to escape from the city. And then Tiberius is like, or we could sniff a bunch of drugs, turn invisible, nearly have a heart attack, and then turn ourselves in. Okay, I guess that's what we're doing now. But like the acts of God and stuff, they introduce this element of chaos that I want you, our viewers, to have this sense of like narrative power where we did something, we changed the story. But I also have to try to make sure that that happens in a satisfying way, where the episode is still fun. Like it's a balancing act, and I'm going to keep tuning it as time goes on, because I want it to be fun. I want it to really be fun, to thank you all for supporting the show and supporting this work. All right, now you can check Discord. Oh, those are some dope minis. Those are super cool. That's good stuff. If I get like a stable space, the travel schedule with Overwatch League and the lads going back to England and stuff, like, it makes it tricky. I live like 100 miles away from LA. So I travel up here to do the work week, and then I travel back home, which means that bringing like big, you know, if I had my way, we would have Dwarven Forge pieces and like minis and terrain and props and all sorts of, you know, all the cool Wormwood stuff that the cool kids get to play with. But logistically, it's challenging. And I'd love to incorporate more like really high-class minis. One of our enhancements we're looking to do down the line is with the battle camera, so we can have like everyone gets cool painted minis. We actually got some cool minis on their way that I will name drop them when they arrive. But some folks in the community have gifted us some really cool custom minis that I want to reward them and show our appreciation by showing that stuff on stream. I haven't gotten good at balancing ways to weave that in to the story. You know, it's like the act of God. It's this unknown element that comes in from outside that's really cool that the community contributed that I want to like celebrate. I just got to figure out a way to narratively make it happen. The NPCs didn't last long because they were rushing around, but it felt natural and everything was going as it should. Yeah, like the NPC shouldn't steal the show. We already have a cast of 4. We don't need a bunch of other NPCs. I just want the players to feel rooted and like the place is alive, you know? But as long as everyone's having a good time, we're succeeding. You didn't DM the first season of Casters and Castles, right? Yeah, Bren DM'd the first season of Casters and Castles. I wrote the material, but Bren ran it. And that was really cool because I'd never done that before. Like, I haven't written adventures for the DMs Guild or anything like that. I've never written content for someone else to consume. So I had to really reevaluate. And Bren is a brilliant, brilliant storyteller, great DM, but he was still getting used to the rules at that time. And like, I have years of experience with the rules, and Bren was still trying to pick up all the, there's so much to keep track of when you're DMing. So I had to write those first adventures in a way that was well organized and like clear and put enough information at his fingertips for him to do as he pleased without being like bogged down. It was a really cool challenge. Funny story about that. The quest for the Book of Dawn, the first arc, has them travel from Artelane's Island to Dotan's Rock, and you can watch the whole thing on YouTube, and you should. It's really good. That whole journey from Artelane's Island to Dotan's Rock, I wrote that whole adventure to take place in episode 1 of the show. It ended up taking the entire campaign arc of like 6 or 7 episodes to get from there to Dotan's Rock. And I wrote 5 encounters that happened between there and Dotan's Rock. They were supposed to get there the whole way. So right out the gate, I write the first adventure, and I immediately realize that I am way overloading this with stuff. Like 3 hours is not a long D&D game. That was our target episode length. So like, it's been so that was a lesson right off the bat. And it still took me several more episodes to really get a feel for how much content we can go through in one episode. The other cool thing is that in episode 1, Gilbert, who's like one of the best characters in the first season, I did not write Gilbert at all. Bren just invented him on the spot and introduced him. And I think this says a lot about Bren's DMing style. He's great at improv. His characters are fantastic. He does the voices and everything. And that's something where he's a lot better at that than I am. I often write the same sort of characters. I'm very fond of powerful, old, and like mysterious, stern female characters. I write a lot of those. And I don't do voices. I try to change small things in my intonation, but like, I don't do voices. I'm not good at doing voices, and I don't know if that's a skill, like that's a skill I can afford to work on, but that's not where my strengths lie. So I should improve that a little bit, but I got to invest into other things. And Bren knocks that out of the park. His improv, his character acting, fantastic. You should definitely, if you haven't watched the first arc, you definitely should. Bemmy, what's up? What's up, dude? Good to see ya. Bemmy's doing a D&D campaign as well, with some cool stars, and I will retweet that because that's been a lot of fun so far. Bemmy's a great DM who's been doing some cool world building, and I recommend that you check that out. I'll shoot that a retweet. I just brought back an NPC that betrayed TPK to one-shot party almost a year ago into the main campaign as a friendly guide. JV Genius, that's a really good touch. That's like a meta, that's a very cool meta thing where you bring back an NPC who killed a bunch of people in a completely different role, and the players are now afraid of him. One of the tricky things is if you set up a character to be a total badass, like evil villain, oftentimes players will be like, oh, this guy's a badass, right? I'm going to poke him. I'm going to mock him. I'm going to be like, you're not so tough. And being the Dungeon Master is not about getting the party to like your cool non-player characters. It's about having a fun time with everybody and creating a cool story. So once you've already killed everybody with an NPC, the work is done. They know. You don't have to tell them, this guy's a badass, you should take him seriously. They know. And that's really cool that you did that. Painting, basically the only thing I do well. Nah, man. But you do that well. It is very cool. You need a stable location that would have a permanent setup to have those sorts of resources. Somewhere to store it all. Yeah, no, 100%. And we don't, we're not Critical Role at this point. We don't have like a studio or a set or anything like that. People are moving a lot. People are going back and forth. People are going to be traveling a lot. So the bells and whistles will have to wait. In the meantime, we're fortunate to work with some really cool players, some really awesome personalities and great people. And they bring a lot of energy and entertainment to the table. I'm super grateful for that. Yes, Bemmy. Campaign has been good. Gonna give it a retweet. Everyone should watch it. More D&D, more goodness. And Bemmy's just like cool people in general. Support their work. So much to keep track of all DMing. Yeah, 100%. 100%. There's just, especially battles. Like, one of the things that I have found with Casters and Castles is that, like, combat's tricky on a stream. Combat's very tricky. Combat, what makes for a good adventure does not necessarily make for an entertaining stream. And you have to be very economical when you're writing an entertainment product as opposed to just hanging out, rolling dice, and smashing orcs. So combat needs to be dramatic on a streamed show. It needs to be tactically interesting. You want to set it in a strange place or with some strange foes. You want it to be cinematic. I find that while I like the grid style minis, wargamey sort of D&D, theater of the mind, or not even theater of the mind, but sometimes playing fast and loose with the rules, or at least letting the players be, maybe not playing fast and loose with the rules, but letting the players be creative and really amping up the entertainment side of combat is important, because otherwise the numbers can get bogged down. And everybody at the table is busy, they have their own lives. You always have one or two people at the table who are hardcore grognards. They love the numbers, they love the crunch, and they know how their character sheet works. Then you've got, and I work with people who are talent. They are on-camera talent. Either they are now, or they have been in the past. So you ask them to act, you ask them to role-play a scene just on a dime, and they, they'll do it, and they'll be great. You ask them to remember what their spells do when they haven't played all week and they've been living an adult life, good luck. So combat can really drag. And like around at your own home, around the table, like, okay, combat drags, but everyone's fun, they're excited. But when you've got, like when we're hanging out with chat and everyone's watching, combat has to move fast and has to be interesting. So that's why I usually try not to write more than one combat into an episode, because we have 3 hours and combat will take an hour. That's just the rules. Combat's gonna take an hour, no matter what. And it needs to be interesting. You can't ever, you're not going to see any random encounters. I'll tell you that much. There might be a variety of options for what encounter could come up, but like we don't have time for, well, okay, if there are random encounters, they're going to be crafted. They're going to be narrative random encounters. They're not, but it's not going to be, oh, you get attacked by a bunch of wolves, because it's like we're writing a TV show. You're not going to have a bunch of wolves in there unless it's interesting and it advances the plot, or at least is exciting to watch. I also came to D&D before esports. Like, I've been in D&D for years and years and years, and then esports happened kind of late in my life, and I've loved it, Bemi, but it's definitely much newer to me than D&D. And the odd thing is, I've never really felt like a part of the D&D community. And it's not that I feel like an outsider. I don't feel like left out of it, right? I've just sort of always had people I play D&D with. And I've always, when you're the dungeon master, when you're willing to DM, a lot of people, I asked on Twitter a while ago, like, hey, if you're not playing D&D but you wish you were, why? And a lot of it depends on where you live, though there's technology now. A lot of it depends on, like, how much control you have over your own life. If you're not in a place where you have several hours alone and a stable internet connection without being interrupted or whatever, it can be hard to play, even if you find a group. But the number one thing is, if you're a dungeon master, you will almost never want, you will, in this day and age, if you are willing to DM, you can almost always find a group if you have access to the internet. So I've always been at the nucleus of whatever group is going on. I've always made groups wherever I go. So doing the whole casters and castles thing is interesting because D&D and tabletop gaming is going through a renaissance. A lot of it has to do with Critical Role. But obviously you've got Stranger Things, you've got 5th edition just being really good, you've got the internet in general, the hobby opening up to all these folk from a variety of backgrounds, and just like becoming this really amazing, vibrant place. And I haven't produced anything aside from Casters and Castles that could be seen as like a consumable product. I haven't written anything for the DMs Guild. I went to my first D&D event last year, so I've been in D&D this whole time, like you, Bemi, but it's always been just my friend group. So it's sort of interesting moving on in this sort of larger community direction. I think it's an exciting time. There's a lot of good people out there. Voices are amazing if you can do it, but it's not entirely needed. Some people are really good at it. Yeah, like you got your Matt Mercers out there who just are literally voice actors and just amazing character actors. And even when I write, I tend to do a lot more mythic style writing or descriptive style writing, or I'll do emotes, like the way that people look and feel and think and stuff, and a lot of that comes from doing online roleplay, but I suck at dialogue. I just suck at dialogue. So when I'm roleplaying an NPC, it can often be tough for me to organically slip in. So I do a lot of my narration, and this is something you can do. Especially if you're new to D&D, you learned about it through Critical Role or whatever, you do not have to speak in character to be in character. You don't have to literally say the words that would come out of your character's mouth, because your character might be far more attractive and witty than you are. Like, there are some forms of speaking I'm just not good at, that I stumble at. And if I want to play a character who's good at that, it would be difficult. Maybe I should try to stretch my boundaries, but it may be difficult for me to do that. So it is always okay to say, Marcus, like, let's say you're narrating a character, it's like Valerian, gives his eyes go distant for a moment, and he turns back and he asks the tribesman, with a sort of steel in his voice, he asks him where he last saw the sorceress. And that's okay to say. You don't have to exactly narrate what your character says word for word. You can speak in third person. And you can still do it dramatically and narratively. And if you're bad at voices or whatever, that's completely valid. I think I actually did that during the stream. I started in first person, realized I wasn't feeling it, I wasn't making it work, and I switched to third person, and we just rolled along. So it's fine to do that as a DM. It's fine to do that as a player. The first arc was the first time I ever watched any D&D. It was a lot of fun. I am glad that you enjoyed it. I also had a lot of fun just writing and sort of being along for the ride. It's all about the people you do it with. So the fact that we have a really entertaining, fun group of people is huge. The chaos. I'm glad that you're DMing again. I'm definitely glad that you're DMing again, Bemmy. And I'm glad that you're streaming. It's something special about taking your hobby and sharing it with other people and making something out of it. Favorite homebrew? Can you clarify for me what kind of homebrew you're talking about? Combat is a hard part to balance on stream. Yes. More Rule of Cool out on stream. I like to be a fairly Rule of Cool DM in general. There's D&D is my first love, and it's, you know, the system that I still play, especially because 5e is so good. But there are systems out there designed for narrative freedom. They even reward narrative freedom. One day I'd like to play one of those on Casters and Castles. I think it'd be a lot of fun. There's a system called PDQ, Prose Descriptive Qualities, which is just it's a really boring name. But it was used to power a series of games, including one called Swashbucklers of the Seven Skies, which is a game about sky pirates. And that game has mechanics that reward you for doing swashbucklery, sky piratey sort of stuff. Like if you describe something with panache or flair, you get mechanical bonuses. If you decide to, you know, you're madly in love with this person, but you know they're going to betray them, but you decide that like, but I can never turn against you because I'm this, you know, romantic, dramatic, heroic, swashbuckling figure, and you do something like that, the game mechanically rewards you. And it also has mechanics that allow the players to get style dice that they can spend either to buff themselves or to do things like add details to the world. So you could say, I want there to be a chandelier. So I swing from the chandelier, and the game master never said there was a chandelier. You spend a style dice, and you make this big chandelier, and you can decide that you're going to like slash the rope and drop it on the Duke, right? And you can do little things like that. You can invent people. You can invent a character and then spend more style dice to like, oh, I have an old friend who's at this port, and a few more style dice. He knows where the local black market is, and a few more style dice, and he's an informant for my secret society as well. So the players actually get a lot of narrative control. So the Rule of Cool is not just the Dungeon Master saying, that's so dope, let's do it, which is my style anyways. That's a tangent. That's my style. Although I would love to run a very nitty-gritty West Marches survival exploration hex crawler. I also like that side of things, but I tend to be more narrative. But that stuff is built in, and the ability for the players to add details to the world is built into the system. I think it's a great system, and I'd love to play it on stream someday. I like Theater of the Mind for everything but combat. Combat is simplified if there's a visual of distance and positioning. Theater of the Mind, while enjoyable, can be really hard to keep it moving. I agree. I think the trick to Theater of the Mind combat is to switch from a video game mentality to a fight choreographer mentality. For example, with Theater of the Mind combat, I would steal a system from Fate. I would steal a system from the Fate system. I would steal a mechanic from the Fate system. I haven't played a whole lot of Fate, but I have played a little bit of Spirit of the Century, which is like a pulp 1910, 1920s Zeppelins and mummies and dinosaurs and secret underworlds, which is, I love that setting. There's some other settings out there I would love to play in. One of my favorites is I did a game that was mechas versus dragons. There was a sci-fi planet that got invaded by D&D blue dragons, and they introduced magic to this world. And so you have like paladins in giant like Gundam mecha suits fighting against dragons and tech wizards, and it's so much fun. It's ridiculous. The way that combat, if I recall, works in Fate is instead of having like a grid, you have zones. So you might say that we have, in our last fight of Arc 2, you have 3 zones. You've got like the cave, the chaos vortex. All right, so let's say you've got 3 zones. You've got Okay, this looks like a boob. I'm going to adjust this. So you've got the cave, you've got the chaos. No, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm going to use squares. I'm going to use squares. That's where we're at in life. Okay, so let's say in the last adventure you have Dotan's Heart, and we'll make this transparent. You got Dotan's Heart, so like just the cave itself. Anything outside that is you're in the tunnels or you've left the battlefield. You've got close to the Chaos Heart. The Wild Heart. That's what it was called, the Wild Heart. And then you've got, like, basically adjacent to or in the Wild Heart. And you just define these zones. And there's a lot of different ways you could do this. You could have multiple zones. They don't have to be concentric. JB Genius, go nail your final exam. Good luck. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you around. So the way I would say it is I'd basically say that players are in one of these zones, and when they move, they can switch zones, right? But basically, and I might say like, oh, you're on this side of it, or you're on this side of it, but I wouldn't use actual, I could just draw this on a piece of paper, right? You wouldn't even have to use minis or a grid. I would draw it on a piece of paper and sort of set it down and just use it to explain to everyone which of these three zones they're in, because you're not defining this as a game of chess or a game of 40K or a video game. You're just saying, in the story of this scene, of this action scene we're writing together, where are you? If you were doing like a kung fu movie, you could say, okay, you're on the stairs, you're on the balcony above, or you're down below, right? So you just define these sort of zones, and then you let players move around in them. You say, okay, I'm going to run up to the top of the stairs, and it doesn't, at that point, if you're doing it as a narrative fight scene, it doesn't matter like how many feet there are. What matters is, can you get there in this round? It'd be like if there's a big fight scene and you cut from one person to the other, right? So we're going to cut to you, you're running up the stairs, but there's a bad guy in your way. So what are you going to do? It's like, all right, I'm going to draw my sword, I'm going to attack him. So you're fighting him. So now in the scene, the two of you, like, you're trying to get up the stairs, but he's blocking you and you're battling. And then we cut over to here where this guy's doing this thing. So instead of thinking of it in terms of individual squares, you just think of it as, okay, each person's turn is a camera cut. And the audience, when you're watching a movie, when you're watching John Wick, it doesn't matter how many feet are between him and his next target. What matters is, can he make it? Can he reach them? And that's a narrative decision. You don't need to measure the distance. All you need to know is, for the tempo of the scene, is he close enough to get there in one round, or does he need to be there in 2 rounds? When you're in combat against 3 people, can you fight all of them? Can you reach one of them? And you can make these sort of decisions on the fly, as long as you describe everything in terms of an action movie or a fantasy movie. It's a very different mindset, especially for people who play a lot of video games. But it's one that can work, and it's one that I think playing other games helps develop. And it really is designed for other games. Like D&D, ever since 3rd edition, is designed to play on a grid. You don't have to. You can 100% do Theater of the Mind. As long as everyone's willing to take into this loose narrative space. But the whole text of the game is very much written to be, 5-foot squares and spell templates and range and all that jazz. All right. I am going to take 2 minutes because I've had a lot of water. So I will BRB. And we probably got another half hour left in this. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to go ahead and drop them in chat, and I'll read them when I get back. We have accomplished none of the things that I set out to accomplish with this stream, but that's okay, because the adventure is what we do together. chair stream over. Last night was an all-nighter too. Good luck, the Big Mick. That is oof. I don't miss college. I do not miss college at all. Not accomplishing what you set out to do and subsequently getting distracted by all the oh look shiny on the side. Yep, it's called D&D. That's exactly how it goes. Yep. All right. So this is the first of this sort of stream I've done with Casters and Castles. I actually did some world building streams on Tormented by Gnomes a while ago, when it was just my pet project and sort of instead of you know, tied into this whole awesome thing. It's given me some ideas though. I set out to do some vague world building in the Northern Kingdoms, and I didn't really do that, but that's okay. We did other cool stuff together. I think what I might do next time, or if I'm gonna kind of structure things better the next time that we do this, which this might be a cool thing to do, not on Tuesdays. Like if we can get full games going on Tuesdays, and then this will just be like a side thing that we do as well, or tasty content. See, I'd love to sit down and pick your brain gnomes when I decide to go back to my own world. I'd be happy to. One thing I want to do is I want to get like Doa and Pixie and a couple of other DMs. I've talked about this on Twitter. I want to get like 4 different GMs who are all doing world building and have a round table, like a panel with questions and stuff on stream. I don't know what the questions would be, and I wouldn't want to moderate it because, you know, I'd want to talk about the cool stuff that I do, but I'd love to do that, get some different world builders on. I do want to do more of these world building, theory crafting streams. We talked as much about D&D itself and how to run the game and setting that stuff up as we did world building. But I did do some very focused world building streams before, like I said. Yeah, I'm going to do more world building on streams. I want to take you folks through my process for how I create NPCs. Because I have a system that I really like for generating NPCs, sort of a random seed on the fly. It takes resources from a bunch of different D&D products into random tables, and so when I'm generating NPCs, I start with that system. And so what I think what we might do next time is I might have more of a focused prompt, where it's like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to build a noble house, and then here's the steps we're going to follow. And as we go along, I take people through the process, and like I threatened to before, let subscribers and community members and stuff contribute along the way. So it'd be like, all right, this subscriber, this person in chat, what's the family crest of this house, and where should they live? Okay, and then like I'll sort of go on and let combination of showing you my process while letting you folks contribute at the same time. I think having like a focused, we're gonna do this today, would be cool, as long as we're open to wandering around more as well. Ren might be a good host for that. That's true. That's 100% true. We've also had some other folk volunteer to host on Twitter as well. And I love getting lots of people involved. I love dragging people into projects. It's my favorite. But I do think that would be cool. We just need to schedule the right creators. So yeah, I want to take everyone through the process of how I make towns and let people help me build a town. I want to take everyone through the process of building like an organization, a noble family, and all the NPCs that go into it. All this is going into, it's all sort of building up to Arc 3 of Casters and Castles. And Arc 3 is going to be interesting. Because will there be long-term consequences of detonating a magical chaos nuke in the Silent City, all the remains of the world before? Yes. Will there be consequences for unleashing a Shardalon, the Dragon of the First Gate, the Demon Heart, in the middle of the warring kingdoms? That, honestly, that's going to be like... That's a big deal. in terms of lore, I don't want to say lore disruption, because when everyone was saying, you know, oh no, they did all this stuff, they wrecked your lore, I'm so sorry. I don't see it that way. I see it as this unexpected plot twist that is going to shake everything up, but it's exciting, it's cool. Like, yeah, it's going to require some thinking, but it's a really cool. What if this legendary dragon suddenly appeared in the middle of this civil war? And the reason that I wanted to do Noble Houses and detail out Galadron a little bit more is so I would know what is the actual status, what's going on when this dragon that Tiberius summoned appears. And what happens? Like, what are the consequences? What sort of power struggle ensues? What would Ashardalon's first moves be? How would the people around react? Because that stuff, that is campaign fodder. That's not just background fluff. That's like, because this next story, unless we want to go in a completely different direction, because you'll notice the first story took place up here, and the next story took place up here. I have a lot of really cool stuff in Sharon. Brontha would be interesting. The desert elves, like the cattle ranchers and the farmers that Wavepunk introduced to the world, they live in northern Brontha. Abaratum is this wild city that I'd love to do a story in someday. Okarthal. Okarthal is the 10 dragon tribes of Okarthal. It's a completely different culture. It is, and there's some wild adventures we could go on there. So I think the right thing to do in terms of like what's going to be the most fun for our viewers, for you folks, is to directly tie every campaign into each other, or at least have them, like, the consequences always roll forward, so everyone has that sense of continuity, but it's a new jumping on point. So I think the right thing to do is to set the next campaign in Galadron or Vercingetorix, somewhere close enough to Dotun's Rock that the fallout of the last campaign is super evident, and it's right there, and have it be, maybe the next campaign isn't the quest to defeat Ashardalon, but maybe it's like, it's directly related to that. And so in order to do that, I want to know the political landscape and what sort of stuff is going on before this giant fuck-off dragon appears out of nowhere. So that's still my goal. When is Arc 3 going to be? Don't know yet. The uncertainty of international travel and long-term scheduling hangs over us. Right now, I'm just trying to make sure that we have cool stuff to do in January, for the 4 weeks of January. All right. Let me check in with everyone. Arc 3, Wrath of the Lich King. I mean, yeah. Return of the Wanderscape. It's Cataclysm, like, right? They got Deathwing. They basically summoned Deathwing. Did he have to summon Deathwing? No, that was completely avoidable. He chose to do it. So, I mean, it's Cataclysm style. It is an active Bren. Wild magic. Like, it all comes down to wild magic. Wild magic, it just sows chaos everywhere it goes. It has, this whole campaign, both these campaign arcs have hinged around the consequences of wild magic. I will say that the summoning of the dragon was not a wild search. Like we said, that was Bren. Bren did that, which I think is awesome. I think it's so much fun. So I do want it to tie in. So I think what we might do, if I stream next week on Tuesday, it will be on Christmas Eve, which is an odd time for a stream. I don't know if I'm going to have plans yet. And again, because the lads are going to be overseas, coordination is going to be tricky. So we're going to be kind of playing things by ear in terms of scheduling. Will you retcon the dragon into the future campaign? So the future campaign ran for 2 years and finished. It actually, like, we got to play the whole campaign from start to finish. And it took place far enough in the future that all those events could theoretically have happened. Like Ashardalon being summoned and whatever the fuck is about to happen. It happened so long ago that it wouldn't take too much retconning. All I'd have to do for the continuity of that future campaign to be intact is just edit some of the ancient history, which is not too hard. I'm not super worried about it though, because that campaign was a thing I did with my friends, right? It's not a published product. It didn't get streamed. It's an experience that we all shared together, but it could be a separate continuity, or it could be unaffected. So I'm not super worried. That's the nice thing about having all this future ahead, is that I've done a lot with that, but I haven't like done anything with it. I haven't put it out in front of the public. I haven't written a novel. I haven't published a stream or anything. So if things change, that is okay. It's not going to ruin it. When is the next Casters and Castles? I was just actually talking about this. Sideshow is going back to home, and Bren is home overseas right now. So the schedule is in a wee bit of flux. I don't know when Arc 3 is going to begin. We are still working on that together. We're also figuring out the cast for Arc 3. Everyone had a great time. It was a fantastic cast, but it all depends on who's available and all that stuff. So when is Arc 3 going to be? Stay tuned. We are planning on having Tuesday night streams in our normal time slot through all of January. I'm working on booking that right now. What exactly that content looks like, we got a couple different things going. We might play some more Descent into Avernus with my old friends, because I'm really enjoying that campaign. That's a lot of fun. We might do some more of these world building streams, but I don't want to just do world building and like let's talk, just chatting and stuff throughout all of January. I want to bring you some games. So we're working on that programming right now. Tales from the Golden Bough is back every other Sunday. This Sunday, we're going to have Imagine 42. We're going to have Mushu Beef. We're going to have Ham Tornado. And we're going to have Booposaurus. We're going to have Boop. Yeah. So that's going to be a hilarious one-shot with those folks. I'm really excited for that on Sunday. I am going to try to do something next Tuesday on Christmas Eve. It's a holiday. Most folks are going to be with their families. I am not going home to visit my family, but like I'll be at home with my wife. So that's hit or miss. The Thursday after that is New Year's Eve. And I will definitely be at a party somewhere. So I will not be streaming. We will try, because by that point, Bren and Sideshow might be in a position where they can do something, but they're going to want to celebrate New Year's. So we're going to try to get like a pre-recorded VOD and debut it on New Year's. Then we get into the 4 weeks of January, which we're definitely going to have like played content. I think a few of those are going to be Descent into Avernus, but again, once everyone's done traveling and settled in and has a better idea of the long-term plans, we'll talk about it, and we'll see if we can bring you either Arc 3 or some kind of a mini-series or something like that. But if you tune in, there will be stuff to watch. Absolutely through all of January, hopefully the next 2 weeks of the holiday as well. My DMs open on Discord. My DMs should be open. You can also discuss stuff just in the Discord channel. I pay close attention to that. I'm very active in there. Our subscribers have a special channel that they can access as well, submit suggestions and such. We're not always able to incorporate everything, and sometimes when people have... So it's like... It's sort of a fine line where we're at, because Anakra, the world, it's like I own Anakra. It's my creation. I have the copyright on it. Blah blah blah. But Casters and Castles is our whole group project that we all own together. And when people have suggestions and ideas, like you're never supposed to send your story ideas to a novelist, because if they see them and then they use them, that can mess things up for them. But I think when it comes to production enhancements and stuff that you, like as a viewer, would enjoy, we're always open to hear that. When things get into the nitty-gritty of plot and stuff, that's where like we can listen to suggestions, but it gets a little dicey. But we're definitely open to production suggestions. Hopefully not until after Overwatch League 2020. There will be Casters and Castles. We are not going dark for Overwatch League 2020. the goal right now is to continue doing Tuesdays through Overwatch League 2020. And if that changes, we will let you know, because there are no matches on Tuesdays. The trick is with travel and family obligations and stuff, there's very little time. Like, the schedule's pretty jam-packed, but we're going to keep trying to do Tuesday nights. As soon as we know when Arc 3 is, we'll announce it, and it'll have a set schedule like last time. I know Arc 1 had no set schedule, but Arc 2, we had a schedule, we stuck to it. We succeeded on that, so I'm happy with that. Home and I can join you next Tuesday. Awesome. That will be glorious. Yeah, Mushu Beef, I'm super stoked. This is Eve. Tomorrow? Yeah, no, for sure. Story related? Yeah, if it's a production enhancement or like for subscribers, if there's different subscriber perks they'd like to see, definitely down. Yeah, we're going to be super busy, Bradley. It's going to be wild. Last year was busy. This year is going to be wild. So one idea that I had, and this sort of just comes back to something that I'm always trying to pull off ever since I did a lot of online roleplay. I would love to have a system where subscribers, like we have all these barons and nobles of Galadron in the wake of, you know, there's no king and there's civil war and everyone's vying for the throne, and it's like old school Game of Thrones, you know, more Dark Ages Game of Thrones. I would love to have a system where subscribers can join different noble houses and like play a mini game every week where they like do like almost like a diplomacy style board game, but in the D&D system. It's an idea that is batting around in my head. I think it'd be super interactive. I think it'd be fun. It'd like give everyone sort of a chance to play, even if they don't get to play in the live games. It could sort of I know Far Verona does something like this with faction turns. I think giving the community the chance to sort of get involved with that would be cool. Like, what if a community member got to be the general or the duke of this, you know? So when our stories are taking place and the streams are taking place, they're being shaped by the choices of the player community to a degree. Where we know if these people are at war, or we know if, you know, this place is rich or poor because of the stuff that the players have done. And then, like, the adventure happens, and suddenly this noble house, you know, one of their scions has been slain, and suddenly because Bren popped off and did something ridiculous, or Sideshow just decided to shank somebody, right? So that throws the whole game into chaos. I love the idea. I love the idea of that. I would love to do that. Implementation is tricky. With Overwatch League 2020 coming up and still trying to write the main show, there'd have to be a rule set and weekly updates and stuff. So on the implementation side, that's a challenge. It is something I think would be dope as hell. I think I've been talking a lot with Sean on Discord about West Marches style campaigns where people are exploring a wilderness and you can have a ton of different players. And I think an awesome sub benefit would be the ability to have a character in that West Marches campaign. So, like, you get to sign up to play in these open world hex crawling adventures and go out on expeditions, and the community would explore this wilderness together and add to a map and stuff like that. But again, implementation would be super, super labor intensive. It would take a lot of organizing and resources that may not be available with everything else going on. Day jobs and stuff like that. All right. Thank you for staying up with us, Sean. Awesome having you around. Appreciate you a lot. Any thoughts as to spin-off content from the campaign? I would have loved to read something like the Journals of Brindar as a way to get a different point of view on what I just watched. Yeah. I think that is a sick idea. The only spin-off content we've done so far has been the Tiberius's Tales, where he summarized the adventures. And I think there's a lot of value in that sort of stuff, especially like down the line, hopefully, when we have 10 different seasons, 10 different arcs, and somebody wants to get caught up. Like, what's one of the major barriers of entry if you want to get into Critical Role? It's the fact that if you want to catch up on the first season, like the first campaign, there's 700 hours of content or something like that. So having summary episodes so somebody can get caught up quickly, I think would be dope. But I love the idea of Brindar's journals or whatever, right? I think that's super cool. And I definitely think it's something that I'd like to integrate. As I continue to build out the world anvil, because I keep saying and a lot of the sort of stuff we're talking about is the stuff that I mostly work on. I don't know if I would feel right doing Brindar's journals. You know, I'd have to talk with Mika to see if Mika's okay with that, because Brindar's sort of Mika's character, even though he was half an NPC. So a lot of that stuff depends on who's available to contribute additional time. All of our cast is pretty busy. They have very complex esports schedules. But because I do the world building and stuff, a lot of this stuff is the sort of thing that I would do. Like if Bren is going to record the on-camera summaries with the help of Kurt, our badass producer, and Sideshow and everyone else, like if they're going to be recording that content, they're more likely to do video content. I'm more likely to do these live streams, but written material like a journal, I think that's a great idea. So I'm definitely open to that. It's just a matter of resource allocation. Chris, if want to save. Chris, that once a week a character does something totally random, usually stupid, that is completely out of the character's control. See, the thing about that is I don't think we need that, because the Wanderstaves just do something outrageous every week anyways, without a curse. They just pop off and do something wild. It's fantastic. Alright, yeah, exactly. It's called being a Wanderstave. Alright folks, it's been about 3 hours. My 3-hour fantasy music playlist has gone off. It's also called Being Bren. And 3 hours is sort of our target mark for most of our episodes anyways, and I'm starting to lose my voice from just running my gab. I really had a lot of fun. I appreciate everybody who's been in chat asking questions. As much as I'm always willing to talk about my baby for hours and hours on end, it's really been cool getting to talk with everybody, hear your awesome ideas, answer your questions. So while I don't want to use these world building style streams too often to fill content gaps, it is something that I really enjoyed and I would like to do more of. So if we get the bandwidth to do that, I'll announce it on Twitter. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. If you're not in our Discord, join our Discord. I think most of you are. But we'll make all that announced. Yeah. They usually do it more than once a week. Again, that's the Wanderstaves. All right, so let's see who's there's anyone that we can drop everybody in on. Anyone we can say hello to. So we could. The odd thing about Casters and Castles is that obviously it's a bit of an esports production because everyone works in esports and a lot of our community is in esports. But in terms of content, like somebody, so if you're here hanging out with us and you're not about to go to bed and you're looking to watch some more stuff, maybe you want to watch Overwatch, maybe you want to watch someone doing D&D stuff. And I like the idea of supporting people in the D&D space. Let's just see. Alright, nobody's playing D&D. If someone was doing D&D stuff, I would drop in on them. Let's see if anyone else is doing something. Alright. Let's just we'll say hi to Dogman. See if this command works. And again, thank you everybody for joining us. If you like the lore of Anakra and you want more of it, aside from these world building streams, I'd like to do videos at some point, but the World Anvil is live. You can get to the World Anvil. I will make sure that it's linked. Every time that we do a new article, we'll tweet it out from the official Casters and Castles website. And again, I'd like to do like mini lore videos so that if you don't want to sit there and read a paragraph, you can just get it narrated. If I could do it with art and animation, that'd be sick. Don't have the budget or the time right now, so it's not going to be a thing yet. But I would love to do it sometime. All right, thank you everyone so much for all your support. Have a fantastic night, and if I'll see you next week, I'll announce it on Twitter. Did that work? I have no idea if that worked. Oh no, I can do it over here. Yeah, no, that worked. Awesome. All right. Peace.